Welcome into 49ers Access. My name is Sterling Bennett, and with the NFL trade deadline less than 1 month away, and thankfully this year it happens during the San Francisco 49ers bye week, so John Lynch will have plenty of time to talk and make some deals. But with Davante Adams and Amari Cooper being traded yesterday, Adams goes from the Raiders to the Jets, and Amari Cooper goes from the Browns to the Bills. It got me thinking, could we see more pre-deadline trades being made? And would it be smart for the San Francisco 49ers to take action now before maybe a competitor swoops in and steals a player they are eyeing? I want to start off by kindly asking you to like, share, and subscribe, but more importantly, let's talk Niners deadline strategy. So right now, San Francisco is 3-3. They're 500 and in first place in the NFC West. There's a lot of ways their season can go over the course of the next 2 weeks, right? You have the Kansas City Chiefs this Sunday. That could very easily be a win, but also be a loss if history repeats itself. And the Dallas Cowboys, who are coming off probably the worst loss of any team this season after getting just shellacked at home against the Detroit Lions. So we'll see what transpires the next 2 weeks for the San Francisco 49ers. But I think San Francisco's trade deadline strategy could hinge on what happens the next 2 weeks. If you beat the Chiefs, you kind of have this sense of, okay, we're over the hump, right? We are better than we were last year in a sense. You beat your biggest rival the past, 4 or 5 seasons so far. The one team that's been standing in your way, you knocked off if you beat KC this Sunday. And the Dallas Cowboys, you win that game. You walk into the bye week at, 5-3, feeling pretty good about yourself, in a really good spot. And you're saying, wow, okay, we get to rest up. We can hopefully get back Ricky Pearsall. Maybe there's a place where John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan view a trade deadline of, we can certainly buy some players, but if they lose, let's say, against KC or split against KC and the Dallas Cowboys, do they view a possible return of Christian McCaffrey and Dre Greenlaw and John Feliciano? And maybe, if all comes to a head, Talanoa Hufanga comes back again from IR. Is that their, quote-unquote big moves of the trade deadline this season? Now, I think San Francisco finds themselves in a pretty interesting spot. Again, I think these next 2 games are going to play a big factor into what happens at the deadline this year, but I don't think it should entirely impact the strategy as a whole. I think San Francisco views this, and smartly does, as a win-now season. You're in the Super Bowl window, Brock Purdy's final year of his rookie contract. You just paid Brandon Ayuk. You just redid contracts of George Kittle and of Javon Hargrave. You're still in a good spot to win the NFC West. Again, you're still in first place. But walking into the deadline, I think there are a lot of moves that are smaller moves that could happen. But if San Francisco wants to swing for the fences, I think Max Crosby's off the table. He ain't going nowhere. I would wholeheartedly stay away from Hassan Reddick. He hasn't played football in 9 months. Why would you want to bring that guy in here? I get it. He's a star edge rusher, but he hasn't played football in 9 months. If I'm being honest with you, he has one of the worst holdouts of all time, minus Le'Veon Bell. There's no promise once he comes back that, let's say he misses 8 weeks of the NFL season, it could take Reddick 8 weeks to come back and be his self again, which by that time maybe you get lucky and you're in the playoffs, but your season could go the exact opposite way if the first 6 weeks of this season is anything to remind us of, hey, you were 3-3, you are 3-3 this year, but I have 10 names that we should keep our eyes on that San Francisco might want to take a look at this year's trade deadline, or even beforehand if they want to get aggressive and strike early before, let's say, teams like the Lions, the Packers, the Seahawks already made a trade. There are a lot of teams vying for help via the trade market this year, so it might behoove San Francisco to strike first. We saw last year And even in previous seasons, John Lynch is never afraid to make moves. Emmanuel Sanders in 2019 was the big splash they made to help push them over the top and almost win that Super Bowl. What if Jimmy G hit Emmanuel Sanders on that play to score the game-winning touchdown against KC? Whew! History could be different, but even in previous years, more recently, if you will, Jordan Willis traded away Quan Alexander, got Randy Gregory and Chase Young last year. San Francisco is never afraid to make moves, and one of the first trades we have to talk about that could be on the docket is with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, the Jacksonville Jaguars have already kind of said, hey, we are selling, right? We're in a bad spot. We've underperformed this year. I would not be shocked to watch Doug Peterson get fired in the next few weeks if things continue on that downward trend they're on. But they signed some big names the offseason, mainly Eric Armstead, who has underperformed in Jacksonville. They have one of the worst defenses in football. And again, the Colts are middling out. The Texans are really good this year and could win the Super Bowl. So the Jaguars find themselves in the in-between, a team that can say, you know what? If you fire Doug Peterson, fired Trent Baalke, fingers crossed he's out of there for Jacksonville Jaguars fans' sake, let's trade away some pieces that they brought in that could actually net us some higher-end or middle-round draft picks to help rebuild or retool in the next upcoming seasons while you have to pay Trevor Lawrence a massive contract. And the first trade target I have for the San Francisco 49ers is defensive tackle Devon Hamilton. Now, I know he's having a bad year, but he's a former third-round pick. He's 27 years old, and he just signed a brand-new contract. I believe it was this past offseason. He is signed through 2026. The major question is, again, would the Jaguars make this trade? They invested on the interior of the defensive line, and we are seeing now that the NFL has kind of shifted their focus away from edge rushers back to the interior of the defensive line. San Francisco obviously was a major focus of this, getting Hargrave a couple years ago, letting Armstead go last year, trading for Malik Collins to improve the interior rush. Obviously, Hargrave's now hurt. Yetur Gross-Matos also hurt. You're relying on players like Evan Anderson, who's been a big surprise this year, Kevin Givens, and of course Malik Collins. But would the Jaguars actually make this trade? I think they would, only if it was going to net them a third-round pick, right? A second-round pick. Now, would San Francisco make this deal? It's less likely. I would assume San Francisco, if they're going to spend a day 2 pick, an early day 2 pick, would want to get, a star, if you will. Like if Davante Adams, the Raiders were asking for a second-round pick for Davante, Devon Hamilton's not going to net you a second-round pick from the Jacksonville Jaguars, especially because San Francisco would have to commit a multi-year deal to Hamilton because, again, he's under contract through 2026, and it would cost the Jaguars roughly $1.5 million to trade him. So it's less likely this move takes place, but former Ohio State Buckeye, third-round pick, showed promise his first couple years in the NFL. He had a 73.3 pass rush grade last season, but he is known as a run-stuffing defensive lineman. So you have to ask, with all these trades you can make on the defensive line, if the guy's having a bad year elsewhere, you're banking on Chris Kocurek doing his best job to turn these guys' careers / seasons around. My money would be on Kocurek being able to do that, but with Hamilton, while I think it's a possibility, there are injury concerns with him. Last season, he developed a spinal abscess, which cost him a large portion of last year and could impact his ability long-term to play. So there definitely is a boom or bust with Devon Hamilton, but if San Francisco is okay paying a 27-year-old, potentially injury-concerned defensive tackle, I could see a deal being done already under contract for the next few seasons, so they wouldn't have to even touch him. But I want to move on to more of a 1-year kind of hit for San Francisco, and that being the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are arguably one of the biggest disasters in football this year. They came into this year in one of the toughest divisions to play. The Ravens, the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Browns. The hopes were high, right? Nick Chubb's back off the injury soon. The defense was historically good last year. But you walk into this year, Deshaun Watson is playing like not just the worst quarterback in football, he's playing like one of the worst backup quarterbacks in football. They're terrible. They suck. They can't move the football. The defense is on the field, frankly, too much to actually be playing well, and somehow they're still playing at a competitive level this year. But with the Browns already trading Amari Cooper away, signaling that, hey, for veterans making a larger chunk of money, we're okay selling some of these players off. So that turned my mind to two defensive tackles they have, one of them being defensive tackle Shelby Harris. Now, Harris is older. He's 33 years old, but he's under contract through 2025, so you have him for 2 years. He's more controllable, and San Francisco can save around $1.3 million if they choose to not bring him back in 2025, so a commitment is not long-term at all for San Francisco. And this year alone, he's more proven than Devon Hamilton in Jacksonville. He cost you less than Hamilton. He also is the 24th ranked defensive lineman with a 66.7 run defense grade. Not much of a pass rusher, but that's why you have Malik Collins in the building to be your primary pass rushing defensive lineman. He's a vet. He knows how to win. And again, when San Francisco looks at their defense, where are they most vulnerable? It's against the run. The secondary is pretty good this year, although you have younger guys playing. Renardo Green was excellent against the Seattle Seahawks. I hope he starts against Kansas City. Mustafa, if he's healthy, was pretty good against Seattle and should be on the up and up the next few weeks if he can maintain his health. You want to stop a team like the Chiefs, a team like the Cowboys, in the next few months, a team like the Bills with Jameis Cook and the Packers with Josh Jacobs. And later in the year, you want to stop Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery from just running all over you. Shelby Harris could be a big part of that. Again, the 24th ranked interior defensive lineman in regards to run defense grade. The next Browns defensive tackle is one that we are actually somewhat familiar with here in San Francisco, that being Maurice Hurst. Now, compared to Hamilton and Shelby Harris, Hurst would be a depth addition, probably a 7th round pick, a 6th round pick. You wouldn't have to get rid of too much to acquire a player like Mo Hurst. San Francisco had high hopes for him. He was part of the Arden Key signing during the offseason, brought 2 Raiders in. Key obviously was a splash, then left the next year. Hurst stuck around, then got injured during training camp. He tore his bicep and never kind of was able to make an impact despite pretty good preseasons in San Francisco. But on a 1-year deal, he's only 29 years old. And I think that, let's say he's playing behind players like Kevin Givens, like Malik Collins, you're almost fortifying your depth in case somebody goes down. You have a more proven rotational piece next to Evan Anderson, guys you can trust more than T.Y. McGill. And so I really think that this move could be a cheap, under the radar, like, hey, it's a body we can trust behind our starters. And again, relatively cheap for San Francisco to sign. But if you want to talk about big names, starting caliber players that you know are going to help you win games, that you know could potentially push you over the top, the next player I have is playing on one of the worst teams in the NFL. They've already gone through about 3 or 4 quarterbacks so far this year. The reason they beat the Patriots was an Alec Ingold fullback dive touchdown a couple weeks ago. They're a mess, and that being the Miami Dolphins and defensive lineman Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell, I think, he's one of those players you point to and say, look, you're on a 1-year deal. You're 38 years old. This is likely your last chance to win a Super Bowl. There could be this quote-unquote, chase the ring mindset for Calais Campbell. Bring him into San Francisco, put him next to Nick Bosa, put him next to Leonard Floyd, next to Malik Collins, and in front of Fred Warner and hopefully returning Dre Greenlaw soon. You could have a really impactful, although older player being like, look, I'm going to give everything I have for one last go round to win a championship, similar to how the Chiefs got Terrell Suggs in 2019, and he was a big part of them winning their first Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. This year for the Dolphins, it feels like a massive, look, we have to retool, reset. Is Tua going to come back? They say he might, but his future is certainly in doubt because of the concussions he's had. They can save $1.5 million by trading Calais Campbell and, again, give him one final chance to chase a ring. He's 38 years old. He's older, but shockingly enough, this year, he is the 7th best pass rushing defensive lineman in football, and as a whole, is the 8th best graded defensive lineman per PFF. I think you want to add not even a star, a solid plug and play, get your butt in there and give me starting reps day one. Calais Campbell, I think, should be that move. He's not going to cost you too much money. Maybe a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick here or there. You want to talk about Maurice Hurst being a 7th round pick or a 6th round pick cost. Calais Campbell could be exactly that, but give you starting reps, and he can actually come in and wreck games for you on defense. In San Francisco right now, I think, you look at the defense as a whole, they don't have many, holes, if you will, negative spots. Linebacker number 2 is a big part of that, but fixing the interior defensive line would go a long way to helping Nick Bosa and company get to the quarterback, which is the main focus of a Nick Sorensen defense. I think he'd be stellar in San Francisco. I think for a one-year hit, go win a Super Bowl if you possibly can and help your defense thrive late in the season. They've been turning a corner, if you will, after beating Seattle. It's the best they've looked all year. Go get Calais Campbell. Tell them, hey, we're going all in this year. It's an older player, one-year hit, but we're going to maximize this season for San Francisco. I think Calais Campbell sends a clear message to that roster that, look, I know we're banged up. We're 3-3. It isn't the start we wanted, but we're going to give you the pieces to finish off where we think we should be when it's all said and done. Moving on, though, to the next player. Funny enough, it's a player that we are also familiar with in San Francisco, mainly Trent Williams for the wrong reasons. That is Carolina Panthers defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson. Now, go back to last year. I think it was Monday Night Football. San Francisco beats the Giants, but just before halftime, Trent Williams puts his hands around A'Shawn Robinson's neck and is choking him out, and you're like, oh my God, he's going to get tossed out of the game. They're bickering, so it would be a from foe to friend kind of thing, which keep your enemies closer, right? But Robinson is 29 years old. He used to play for the Rams a couple years ago, and he just signed a brand new 3-year deal with the Carolina Panthers, but the Panthers are kind of a mess again. They may be wanting to get rid of Bryce Young. A lot of guys are hurt on that team. It could be a complete kind of rebuild, restructure in Carolina. They have a new GM in Dan Morgan, a new head coach in Canales. They want to retool, reset everything there, but they're a mess. I know Robinson goes a long way, but he's a vet, 29 years old. I doubt he wants to play for a team that, frankly, just simply sucks. They're not competitive. Maybe he wants to come back out west, although up north from his former Rams home. But the Panthers could save around $800,000 by trading him this year and would not have to pay the next 2 years of his contract. So they would save some money in that process. And because of the contract involved, might be able to net them, let's say, a 4th round pick for a starting caliber defensive tackle. Not having the best year, but again, you have to ask yourself, have you seen the Panthers defense? They're injured. They're a mess. It is are you blaming A'Shawn Robinson for their faults, or do you blame the defensive coordinator? Do you blame the pieces around Robinson for the issues they're having? They're a bad roster as a whole. Robinson is nowhere near one of the worst players on that team. And I think that get him out of that situation next to better pieces with a more, dare I say, structured system around him with Nick Sorensen and this defense. I think you could see A'Shawn Robinson play the best football of his career. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario is you traded for a player that has 2 more years on his contract after this year, where you're already paying Malik Collins, you're already paying Javon Hargrave, and you've already gave money to Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos this past offseason. Would you want to do that? A lot of these trade targets are simply, do you want to trade for a player for 1 year, or do you want to give them, 2 more years of your life, if you will, to help them help you, if you will. So players like A'Shawn Robinson, I wouldn't love that. I would more so love Calais Campbell and Mo Hurst to help, maybe a Shelby Harris, whereas Devon Hamilton and A'Shawn Robinson, I probably want to steer clear of simply because the money, but you get them off bad teams onto good teams, maybe you see them play some good football. Moving on to the next player to help the interior defensive line. This is a player that fans have been wishing never left a couple of years ago. It's a player that has been rumored to want to come back to San Francisco for a while. And I think that with some of these players, it depends on what the team does they're playing for, what the team they're playing for does the next few weeks, that being Denver Broncos defensive tackle DJ Jones. I love DJ Jones. How do you not love DJ Jones? He's a great player. On the last year of his deal with the Broncos this year, only 29 years old. The Broncos would save just under $7 million by trading him this year. So if they fall off the next 2 weeks and things just kind of, hit rock bottom for them, I can see them wanting to sell some pieces like Jones. You have no reason to keep him around if you're not going to be competitive. Why not bring him back to San Francisco? And in this case, 1 year deal, Denver saves some money. I can see Jones costing a 4th round pick, where San Francisco's like 4th round picks, 3rd round picks. We get those for free every year. And in DJ Jones's case, for a 1 year deal, let's say you trade for him to bridge you back to Hargrave getting healthy next year or late in the playoffs, well, one, you've deepened your rotation a lot. You've helped your run defense a ton, but Jones has also become a much better pass rusher since leaving San Francisco, so you're getting a better all-around player than what you once had in 2019, in 2020, and in 2021, where DJ Jones was your number 2 defensive tackle next to Armstead, and in previous years, DeForest Buckner. So then you add him next to Collins and Bosa and Floyd, and mixed in with Gross-Matos once he gets healthy, Evan Anderson, you have a really strong, fortified front. And if he wants to leave in the offseason again, well, you get that comp pick back. So San Francisco, in a way, which they love to do this, likes to essentially get players for free. Randy Gregory was a free player, right? Chase Young was kind of a free player last year for San Francisco. So the way you look at deals, they're not going to get the star guy, but let's say they want to trade for Calais Campbell or a DJ Jones, 1 year deals. They can leave in the offseason. You maximize your potential this year on the defensive front, and you watch those guys walk away, either to new teams for a massive contract where you get a higher comp pick. You get players for free to maximize your defense this year. Papa J likes the idea, saying DJ Jones would be awesome to have back. Bobo also says here, they should find a way to get out of Javon Hargrave's contract. He's the new D Ford. I wouldn't go that far. Hargrave was actually having a pretty solid year this year. I think as the defense got more comfortable with Nick Sorensen, as he called more games, you would have saw more out of him this year if he didn't get hurt, but he is hurt. It sucks, but I wouldn't go as far as D Ford just yet. Unfortunately for you, though, Bobo, they just restructured his contract this offseason, so he ain't going nowhere. He ain't going nowhere anytime soon, but enough with the interior defensive line. If you're not going to fix the interior, I think everybody would agree the offense is pretty good. You get Christian McCaffrey back. You have Ricky Pearsall coming back soon. You're stocked at running back. You're stocked at receiver. How about the edge rushing group? It's Nick Bosa, and at the moment, kind of everybody else. Leonard Floyd's been playing better the last 2 weeks, but not been great thus far. Yetur Gross-Matos is on IR. Are they going to bring him back? You don't know. San Francisco has always been aggressive at acquiring edge rushers during the trade deadline, last year being one of the biggest swings they've taken. Chase Young and Randy Gregory. In previous years, it was getting Jordan Willis, who was a major impact against the Packers in the divisional round game before they lost to the Rams in 2021 with the block punt. But I think if you don't want to improve the interior defensive line, you look towards the outside and you look at the edge rushers. Right now, I think one of the prime targets for San Francisco would be calling the Patriots. No, they're not going to get Brandon Ayuk in a trade at all, but I think right now San Francisco would be smart to, give Gerard Mayo a call and say, hey, look, what about edge rusher Josh Uche? He's not been great this year. In fact, he's not been great really since his rookie season, but the Patriots have also not been great since his rookie season. Only 26 years old, on the final year of his contract, and the Patriots would save $900,000 around there if they traded Uche away. Because of his youth, though, and a one-year deal, I can see the Patriots maybe asking for a fourth or third round pick, but we already talked about that. Those are essentially free players for San Francisco. I do think he's very similar to Leonard Floyd in that he is not a three-down player and is more of a third down, a passing play down only player currently, the way he's currently playing with the Patriots. More of a pure pass rusher, if you will. I wouldn't expect him to, stuff the run or set the edge extremely well, but I do think that he's young. And kind of like Chris Kocurek did with Charles Omenihu and Arden Key and other players that came over from other teams that didn't live up to their potential, you sign him to a new year or a new deal in the offseason or extend him for a year or two. You have him until he's 27, 28, and maybe you can find another rotational piece. And if you're lucky, he replaces Leonard Floyd in a couple of years' time once he's gone. So, it's definitely more of a risk to trade for Josh Uche, but I think Uche could actually be a pretty big hit for San Francisco because, one, they like young edge rushers. Two, he wouldn't cost you much. And three, he would be an instant upgrade and probably already your third best edge rusher on your team the minute you acquire him. So I would give the Patriots a call and see what they like. So, I mean, man. I feel like, what are we doing here with not calling the Patriots and saying, hey, what do you want for Josh Uche? It feels kind of like a slam dunk for San Francisco in regards to a pure edge rushing talent to get for essentially maybe for free. Moving on, though, to the next player, we will talk about another player that San Francisco already previously had on their roster and played pretty well, and right now is playing on a pretty bad team, that being Arden Key on the Tennessee Titans. Now, Arden Key's a little older. He's 28 years old. He is signed through 2025 and would cost the Titans around $400,000 to trade him. So they may say, why? But I figured let's toss his name out there. He's already been here before in San Francisco. He exceeded expectations. They kind of remade his career and got him paid after he left. He already likes Chris Kocurek. He fixed his entire career for him. Kind of rebooted him, if you will, after a terrible Raiders run that he had to start his career. And I think that, he kind of be in a very similar boat to how he was when he first signed, right? It was Bosa and Ebukam, then Arden Key, then Omenihu. This year would be Bosa and Floyd, then Arden Key, and Yetur Gross-Matos. So I really think that Key would give you some versatility and also would be able to slide back into the role he once had in San Francisco that arguably had the best defensive line pass rushing talent they've ever seen with Bosa, Ebukam, Key, Omenihu, Armstead. And that team was really good at getting to the quarterback and was a main reason as to why they beat teams like Dallas on the road in the playoffs, the Packers on the road in the playoffs, and had the Rams dead to rights on the road in the playoffs. So I get it. it wouldn't really make sense for the Titans, so maybe San Francisco has to pay up somewhat. 5th round pick for Arden Key, but again, we've come to see that, again, those trades are relatively free for San Francisco. And look, if Key comes to San Francisco, you have him for 2 years' time. You kind of have a cheaper edge rushing group with a more proven player where Uche's a 1-year deal, Calais Campbell's a 1-year deal. You want to bank on having a player in your system for 2 years on a cheaper contract. Arden Key could be that if San Francisco wants to pay a higher price, but again, a higher price is a 5th or 4th round pick for Arden Key. It could be a lane for San Francisco to take to say, you know what, let's have some consistency and carry over for the next few years along with Bosa and the rest of the group we have. Moving on to a player that has kind of had the eye of Niner fans for a really long time, whether it be the trade market or free agency, that is Jadeveon Clowney. On the Panthers, like A'Shawn Robinson, really bad team, really bad defense. My only question would be, Clowney's 31 years old. He has had a really nice career, 53.5 sacks over his entire career. I think he'd be a bigger name talent to make people go, wow, Clowney on that defense across from Bosa. I would have a concern of, would he refuse a trade? He was in Baltimore, he was in Cleveland, he was in Seattle, he was in Houston. Would he want to come all the way out west after just signing with his hometown team, the Carolina Panthers? He's a South Carolina guy. He's playing in front of the home crowd, likely near his home. Why would you want to leave that? That is my major concern with Jadeveon Clowney, and of course the injuries he has. He's currently hurt right now with the shoulder injury. Would that be worth the risk? Maybe not, but I figured, you know what? It would only cost the Panthers $2 million to trade him this year, but they get $10 million off their books next year. And like A'Shawn Robinson, if they want to retool and fix that roster as a whole, kind of reboot themselves and get Bryce Young out of there with the new regime, Clowney could be one of the guys out the door that can probably net them a higher draft pick than, let's say, DJ Wanham could, who was signed this offseason, or one of their younger, albeit not great players on that defense. Like Jadeveon Clowney could be a bigger name that can net you something to help kind of push you into the future, or at least in the right direction. But he could say, you know what, I don't want to leave. I'm in Carolina. But just sitting out there, you say, it could mean something to San Francisco and could give you some oomph and more star power other than Arden Key and Josh Uche could actually provide for you if you acquired those guys instead. I do want to move to linebacker, though, because we have talked long and hard about Devondre Campbell, how bad Devondre Campbell has been for San Francisco, to a point of, why is he starting? Why is he playing? They benched him for, I think, one drive against the Seahawks. They got out of it. They got a 3-and-out, and then they put him right back in. So it didn't really make sense what Nick Sorensen's plan is. I want to see more Dee Winters, Jalen Graham, and company. And linebacker is a position where I feel like San Francisco would not make a trade for a player, but with Dre Greenlaw's return around the corner, are they in a place where once Greenlaw comes back, is he that kind of rotational third linebacker? Then once he's really back, he retakes his job in a contract year. I feel like that's the route San Francisco is going with the linebacker position, but let's say that Greenlaw comes back and, like Talanoa Hufanga, doesn't look like the player he once was, which shouldn't shock anybody. After when you tear your Achilles or tear your ACL, you're not going to be the same your first couple weeks back in the NFL. So I pointed to one player that I think is not great, but could be a cheap acquisition to kind of help bridge that gap and be an upgrade over Devondre Campbell this year. That is Browns linebacker, who we already talked about, Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst. Amari Cooper already got traded. Jordan Hicks could be someone that says, you know what, 7th round pick, 6th round pick, give us a starting backup linebacker caliber player with the Vikings for a handful of years. Started with the Cardinals a handful of years ago as well. So he has starting ability, or at least experience. He could probably be better than Devondre Campbell right now. Jordan Hicks, linebacker, much better as a pass coverage player than run defender, which maybe that doesn't fit San Francisco's forte as of right now. You obviously want to have Winters and Graham and Bethune get those reps, but if those guys struggle and Devondre Campbell continues to play really bad football, I could see San Francisco kind of just feeling out the linebacker market because they're going to bank on Greenlaw coming back, but I just don't know if that's the smartest thing to do, knowing the injury and how serious it was. So I wouldn't say go out and get Jordan Hicks, but keep your eye on the linebacker market for San Francisco. One final edge rusher, though, that is, I think, Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants. The Giants are in a similar position to me like the Denver Broncos, right? They're a relatively bad team, a team kind of in between where they want to be. The Broncos are rebuilding. Sean Payton, Bo Nix trying to push things in the right direction, whereas the Giants are like, we don't like Daniel Jones. Brian Daboll's a good head coach, but our defense hasn't played up to par in recent weeks, but they're kind of turning that corner to playing how they were a couple years ago when they beat the Vikings in the playoffs. And so they're kind of like in limbo. Are you going to be somewhat competitive? Are you going to be bad? I'm not sure. Malik Neighbors isn't healthy. So once Malik Neighbors comes back, we're going to kind of see who they truly are. If they can stay afloat, I wouldn't see them making a trade. But when I look at the Giants, they're a young team that is kind of beaten and broken up by the injuries. They just watch Kayvon Thibodeau go down IR, so like you don't have your star defensive edge rusher, right? But Ojulari is 24, is going to take Thibodeau's spot in the starting lineup, but he's also in the final year of that contract and has not lived up to the hype, whereas rookie season was an 8-sack rookie season. You're like, whoa, who is this guy? Since then, hasn't had over 5.5 sacks in a single year, so he's been getting pushed further and further down the depth chart, and I can see the Giants, if they lose the next 2 weeks, saying, you know what, let's try to get something for Ojulari, trade him elsewhere. He's a lost cause. I think it could be something where the Giants, who are struggling to cover receivers this year, I think they could kind of ask San Francisco for a cornerback where it may not cost you a draft pick, or if it does, it's like a 7th-round pick or a 6th-round pick and a cornerback. So could we see San Francisco say, you know what, we'll give you a 7th-round pick or a 6th-round pick and Darrell Luter Jr., and let's say Ambry Thomas, who, if he's healthy, can be a competitive cornerback in the depth chart in the room and maybe be a starter elsewhere. Or is San Francisco somewhat jaded because Yadam's on a 1-year deal, Mooney Ward's on a 1-year, or the last year of his deal, they got to pay Lenore, Green's there, which is great, but then Rock Yacine's on a 1-year deal. Would they not want to part with the cornerback they have on a multi-year contract? You just let Samuel Womack go, who's played phenomenal with the Colts. Maybe San Francisco says, you know what, we're going to keep our cornerbacks close to hand, but I could also see them saying, you know what, like, Ambry Thomas ain't going to play for us this year. We'll give you Ambry Thomas and a 7th-round pick. Give us Ojulari, make him the third edge rusher. You walk into a playoff game with, let's say, fingers crossed, a healthy Nick Bosa, Malik Collins, Kevin Givens, Leonard Floyd, a healthy Yetur Gross-Matos, and maybe Ojulari, who on a 1-year deal, maybe you maximize. He's 24 years old. He could be the next young edge rushing star in San Francisco that we've been looking to pair with Nick Bosa for a long time. Again, he's been playing worse and worse and worse, being pushed down the depth chart, but he's kind of awesome. When you watch his tape, he has the pass rushing moves you like, but the Giants just are kind of getting away from who they were his rookie season. He needs a reset. He's a player you point to in the offseason and say, hey, San Francisco, sign him, get him in the building now, acclimate him to your defense, and pay him when he's 25 years old, and maybe you have I don't want to say a star-studded defensive line, but you have Bosa, Hargrave, Collins, Floyd, Gross-Matos, Ojulari, you go, wow, kind of like Arden Key, right? Arden Key's 28, Ojulari is 24. You bring back Ojulari, give him Chris Kosaric. You have him for, just this 1 year, but you re-sign him to a couple years. You could be looking at something really nice there on the defensive line for San Francisco. That does it for the defense, though. And I want to talk about one more position that Niner fans are screaming up the heavens. You got to get one of these guys. You got to get one of these guys, and that is the right tackle position. The hope is that once John Feliciano comes back, he replaces Jake Brendel as a starting center. San Francisco's offensive line has actually played relatively well this year. Williams has not been himself, but it's still Trent Williams. I'm sure once the bye week comes and goes, he'll be back to form. He'll have 8-9 weeks to rekindle his body. My expectation is we see him better in the second half of the year, which is great to see. Banks has been pretty good this year in the final year of his rookie contract. Dominic Pooney has been a godsend. He's been awesome. A 0 pressure rate so far this year. That's phenomenal. And then there's Colton McKivitz and Jake Brendel. If Feliciano comes back, maybe you swap him and Brendel out, which improves your center room. Then there's right tackle, which has been a black eye on the offensive line in previous years. McGlinchey, then McKivitz now. It's a position that San Francisco refuses to address, which McKivitz hasn't been terrible. He's just been Colton McKivitz, which is not very good. That said, the Cleveland Browns could be selling some pieces. Now, would the Niners openly make catastrophic, or maybe not catastrophic, massive changes to the offensive line? I don't believe they will. You don't just trade for offensive linemen, but there could be one out there that might pique the interest of San Francisco. That is Cleveland Browns offensive lineman Jack Conklin. Now, Jack Conklin is, to me, highly unlikely to be traded, but if the Browns are willing to answer the phone and do some business, okay, great. You can walk into post-bye week or post-trade deadline with a remade offensive line. If you go and get some defensive help, you can really bolster your roster and improve if you want to put Feliciano out there. And Conklin, you have given yourself the best offensive line you've ever had in San Francisco. And so far this year, it might already be that. It's been playing that well, which if you want to avoid disasters like Spencer Burford in the Super Bowl or Mike Person in the Super Bowl, or just getting banged up and beaten up by the opposing team's defense like Chris Jones, you want to swing big for the fences, Jack Conklin could be out there. Now he is 30 years old. It's probably going to take you, a 4th round pick, if not more. You could be talking 2nd round pick for a player like Jack Conklin, who is one of the best right tackles in football. He's also owed $48 million through 2026, but here's the kicker. The Browns could have incentive to trade him because they have 2023 draft pick DeJuan Jones waiting in the wings to play, and Conklin, who has dealt with pretty big injuries the last 2 years, they can say, you know what, you're older, let's wash our hands, we're paying you big money, but DeJuan Jones is here, he'll start for us. In fact, he's already starting for them this year. They can just make that transition now. The question is, does San Francisco want to pay big money to a right tackle? The odds are not very high, but if they want to go all out and say, you know what, if we're going to pay Trent big money, we're going to pay Conklin big money, we're going to have to watch guys leave. That can be watching Aaron Banks go. That could be not bringing back Hufanga and Mooney Ward and Dre Greenlaw and others on the team. But if that means protecting your star quarterback, we've seen the Chiefs do this, right? They went and got Creed Humphrey. They went and got Trey Smith. They've paid big money to protect their quarterback. It might make more sense for San Francisco to pay up for a right tackle than give you Jake Brendel and Colton McKivitz for the next couple of years. Do I think it happens? Probably not, but it's worth the call to make. We all know San Francisco. They'll definitely inquire. They'll pick up the phone. They'll definitely have those conversations. It might make some sense to say, you know what? We're not going to get Arden Key, Jordan Hicks, Ojulari. We'll get Calais Campbell for 1 year, help the defensive line, and we'll go out and we'll pay big money for a Jack Conklin. You've made your team really, really good for not just 1 year, but for multiple years to come. But money and the cost of a draft pick may not, it might push San Francisco away from that, but it could be worth the deal if it means pushing them over the top and avoiding Chris Jones or whoever's waiting for them come playoff time against the Chiefs, the Lions, the Packers. And it also will protect their biggest asset, that being Brock Purdy. You want to pay that guy $65+ million? Keep him upright. That is the most important position in football, in all sports. You keep Brock Purdy upright, you're probably going to win a ton of games this year. So will it happen? Probably not, but Jack Conklin may be an option for San Francisco if they look to improve the offensive line. And a small tidbit here that I've heard, I have no idea if it's true, so take it with a grain of salt. I have heard that San Francisco has been eyeing the cornerback market. The names I've heard is Denzel Ward and J.C. Horn. Do I believe that? It doesn't make sense to me because they have Green and Yadam and Mooney Ward and Lenore. Like, it doesn't make sense to pay high money or a high cost for those players, but maybe San Francisco is just seeing the cost of what those players would take to acquire them. Denzel Ward has the concussion problem. J.C. Horn has had many injuries in his career and can't stay healthy, but maybe San Francisco is kind of eyeing younger players to eventually replace Mooney Ward, because after this year, Lenore's on the last year of his deal. Mooney Ward's in the last year of his deal. Yadam's a 1-year contract. San Francisco, walking in the next year, only has Darrell Luter Jr. And Renardo Green under contract in that cornerback room. So maybe, just maybe, do I believe it? Maybe not, but just keep your mind open to what could potentially happen during the trade deadline. Tell me what you think San Francisco should do. Are you all in on Calais Campbell? Ojulari from the Giants? Are you just like, no, give me Jack Conklin? Tell me what you think San Francisco should do down below in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the show, whether it's on YouTube or the audio podcasting platforms. Give us a 5-star review. Help the show out for free. And if you kindly could, follow us on social media at 49ers_access is the X or Twitter, and 49ers.access is the Instagram. And if you want to watch a Super Bowl 58 rematch this Sunday at Levi's Stadium, use the promo code 49ersaccess at SeatGeek.com. ACCESS at SeatGeek.com and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. Want to thank Kawachipto, Papa J, and Bobo in the YouTube chat. And thank you so much for watching, listening, liking, and subscribing. And until next time, stay faithful.